Hey team, Rowyn here. This isn't really a tutorial per se, so much as just a behind the scenes look at how I do these draw this in your style challenges. This one is Heather Mahler art, I always said that right, and a Ghoul gal. The purpose of the challenge is just to see how other artists would tackle the same subject. So some artists will change the pose, the colors, and all kinds of things to make it their own style, but still be based on that original piece. I like to select the same colors as the original piece for my palette, and then look at the overall pose of whatever the subject matter is, and then go from there with my own tweaks. You'll see I've changed the angle of the head slightly to begin with, just because the way I personally like to draw profiles. But overall, basically the same pose, right? You can't see in this video, but I have the original piece, my reference really, here off to the side on my second monitor, so I'm looking back and forth from mine to the prompt as I go. That's part of why you'll see me draw something and then rethink whatever it was, and then redraw the same thing slightly different, whether that's spacing to leave room for another detail, such as the hair, or to make it more like what I would have drawn on my own. There's so much movement in this drawing, in the original piece, and so I knew I needed to keep that motion in the hair here, one way or another, even if I don't do hair the same way as this artist does. I draw less individual strands, typically, but you can still see some flyaways here. I wouldn't normally show the details of the shaved head stubble either, opting to do this through color instead, but I felt it was more true to the original to do it this way. The clothing and jewelry had to be as close as possible, just for me. That's just the way I do these things. And it's just on different proportions, right? Given the figure I'd drawn. Otherwise, anywhere it kind of defies gravity and has this other kind of weight to it, I wanted to capture in my version as well. The little ghosts were fun because I wanted them to be shaped the way I personally draw ghosts, with the pointy tails, really long, flowy butts, rather than the rounded edges of the source image. But still keep their faces like they are in that source image. Also the colors, as you'll see soon. And here's my palette. Again, straight from the image I'm looking at as reference. I do love working with limited palettes. You wouldn't think so, given how infrequently I do so in my own work, but I promise I like the limited amount of colors or working in some other restriction. It can help get the creative juices flowing to solve visual problems. These challenges are also great for finding new artists to follow, and for stretching your legs, artistically speaking, in general. It gives you a chance to try out something new, subject matter, color scheme, whatever, in a really small environment, and then you can see how other artists solve the problem of translating this image into their own style as well. It's pretty fascinating. I'll be honest, the tattoos I immediately lost track of. There's a lot. I tried to keep the spirit of the parts I was expanding on, but since my figure's proportions, again, were a little different to begin with, some of this part had to be slightly rearranged anyway. I was also using a rough edge sort of brush for this whole thing, which I think lent itself well to being a little more loose with some sketchier lines, but still looking like what I was aiming for. So here's the original piece again, just to give you a look at what I was seeing throughout the process. And I will link to this person's Instagram in the description. And here's my finished piece. Thank you for joining me. And let me know in the comments if you ever had a chance to do this sort of challenge.